Should your next, or first, small SUV be a hybrid, a proper self-charging petrol-electric one? Toyota thinks it should be, and wheels out this affordable, trendy Yaris Cross as its answer to segment customers. Expect to see a lot of these.
Toyota at last has a credible, truly class competitive, super mini-sized SUV. The Yaris Cross fills an important gap in the company's crossover lineup just below the CHR and should worry Juke and Puma sector rivals with features like all-wheel drive and full hybrid power, which are relatively unusual in this segment. There are so many super mini based crossover SUVs now on the market that you'd be forgiven for wondering whether any new entrant to this segment could possibly bring anything fresh to it. Sure enough, Toyota's description of its contender, the Yaris Cross, really doesn't sound too promising in terms of innovation. This car aims to offer the high-riding qualities of an SUV, but on a scale tailored to suit urban areas. So just like any other Juke or Puma-sized small crossover then, except that the Yaris Cross isn't just another small SUV. You can have it with four-wheel drive for a start, which, believe it or not, is pretty revolutionary in this normally front-driven only sector. On top of that, for our market anyway, it comes only with a full hybrid engine. Not a token gesture mild hybrid like you get in, say, that rival Ford Puma or perhaps a Suzuki Vitara or a Kia Stonic, but a full-fat petrol-electric powertrain that doesn't need plugging in but can run all electrically some of the time. In this segment, only Hyundai, Honda and Renault can also offer that, and they charge quite a lot more for it. In short, Toyota seems to have produced something really appealing here, which wasn't the case the last time the company properly entered this segment with the ill-fated urban cruiser of 2009. With the Yaris Cross launched in early 2021, the brand's European division was determined to this time get it right. This little Gallic-designed and French-built crossover, part of a family of Yaris models that already includes a searing hot hatch and, of course, the popular hybrid Super Mini. If your interest in this Yaris Cross is starting to grow, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out more. Every kind of powertrain possibility is these days available to customers in the sector for small crossovers. That includes conventional, mild hybrid, plug-in hybrid and full EV. Since the first two aren't optimum for efficiency and the last two push list prices up to potentially painful levels, it's hard not to agree in principle with Toyota's reasoning that another option, the self-charging full hybrid engine we have in this Yaris Cross, might hit the sweet spot when it comes to power plant perusal in this class. It feels that way on the road too, where you can see and feel the powertrain making a difference, unlike with a mild hybrid, and that's without saddling you with the clunky battery weight of a PHEV or a full electric model. A few years back, Toyota provided this kind of technology to Yaris customers, packaged in with about as much journeying appeal as you get from taking the bus. A crossover evolved from that kind of confection would have been one that we'd have tried to steer well clear of, but this Yaris Cross, thankfully, is developed from a very different kind of product. The fourth generation Yaris Super Mini it's based on was engineered under Toyota boss Akio Toyoda's new era mantra of no more boring cars, and it gained a more agile, eager feel thanks to a swifter response from the fourth generation hybrid system and a stiffer GAB version of the company's fresh TNGA platform. It was almost fun, and from what we'd previously defined as the definitive boring car, that was a revelation. Nor in its crossover form has this car been spoiled by a bit of extra weight and ride height, as is so often the case when it comes to SUVs evolved from small hatches. You're certainly not going to find reasons to take the back way home in a Yaris Cross, but it's hard not to be impressed by the accurate well-weighted steering, the surprisingly keen corner turning, and the minimal body roll through the bends. It's quite well damped too, a little on the firm side perhaps, but not to the extent where you'll crash over potholes and speed humps. What you'll remember about this car though, as with the ordinary Yaris, is the way it combines its combustion engineering with a pleasing amount of EV-ness, in urban and suburban driving at least, up to 80% of which you can conduct without burning fossil fuel if you're careful with the throttle. In town, the 56 kilowatt electric motor is usually sufficient for propulsion up to around 30 miles an hour, above which the car will switch to hybrid mode, and its ECU decides whether to use petrol, electric, or a combination of both sources. Now you can monitor all this on the provided driver information screen, which shows a breakdown of how much time you've spent driving on pure battery power. There's an EV mode button if you want to use electrical energy as much as possible. You'll get about 4 miles of total range from the tiny 0.76 kilowatt hour battery, and that can be more quickly replenished if you use the gear stick's provided B setting, and that maximizes brake energy regeneration. Out of town driving was where earlier Yaris hybrid models used to feel all at sea, but this one's much better. The combined efforts of the engine and its primary electric motor developed 15% more power with this 4th generation hybrid system. Total output from the 3-cylinder 1.5 litre VVT-i petrol engine is rated at 114 bhp, which means that mid-range overtakes don't need to be planned with a calendar anymore. Well, not if you switch out of the softer throttle map of the laid-back Eco Drive mode anyway into the available power setting, at which point 62 miles an hour from rest is 11.2 seconds away en route to a very modest maximum of 106 miles an hour. Best of all, Toyota has finally produced a CVT belt-driven automatic gearbox mandatory with this engine, which gets close to conquering the rubber band effect, which usually affects this kind of transmission. In earlier Yaris hybrids, if you plonked down your right foot, the revs rose, the engine flared, your eardrums rattled, but not very much was achieved in terms of swifter forward motion. It wouldn't be quite correct to say that this issue has been entirely eradicated by the reworked eCVT Auto that features here, but it has been vastly improved. That's aided, we suspect, primarily by the evolved hybrid system's new lithium-ion battery with its 50% power hike, and the fact that it's now chipping in to fill drivability gaps far more frequently. It zips you away from rest too, really quickly, just like an EV. As with the ordinary Yaris Super Mini, refinement is excellent, and that makes longer trips more palatable. These are aided by the standardization of intelligent adaptive cruise control. Now that can automatically maintain your distance to the car in front on the highway. Now, on that kind of road, older generation Yaris hybrids would always have run entirely on petrol power. In theory, although not in our experience in practice, this model shouldn't necessarily have to do that now, given the way that the evolved hybrid system's denser battery cells have made possible a much higher all-electric top speed of 81 miles an hour. At much lower speeds, when, as we've been saying, the battery certainly will be your primary power source, all you really hear is a bit of muted whining under acceleration from the electrical hardware. So, powertrain cleverness, which is rare in the SUV segment. What's even rarer though, on a small crossover these days, is something that by and large, customers in this class have decided they don't need, and that's four-wheel drive. If ever a car in this sector was going to provide that, you wouldn't have expected it to be this one, but no, Toyota has gone to the trouble of offering a 4x4 system here for the tiny proportion of customers who are prepared to pay for it. That's meant to switch in suspension setup from the conventional twist beam rear arrangement to double wishbones, and a switch also in approach to the all-wheel drive I package, which is far more appropriate for this class of car. Instead of the heavy mechanical transfer box, which directs drive to the rear in, say, a similarly sized Jeep Renegade 4x4, an all-wheel drive Yaris Cross simply gets a small, light electric motor added to the rear axle, which communicates electronically with the electric motors up front to provide extra grip and stability when you're pulling away and cornering, plus additional safety when you're driving on slippery surfaces. The latter scenario is easier to manage with the selection of a provided snow mode, while the alternative trail setting can be used to help negotiate tricky situations where one or more of the wheels can't grip the road surface, for example on very uneven ground. You're certainly not going to want the ground in question to be too uneven, because there's no increase in the standard model's modest 170mm ride height, nor is there any increase in brake towing capacity either, which in the all-wheel drive I variant remains meagerly rated at just 750 kilos. Our focus here though is on the conventional model, and that whirs and warbles its way through the rev range with a rather endearing thrum, which will be familiar to Yaris regulars, and they'll appreciate this Cross model's higher seating position and its agile 5.3 metre turning circle. We think though that this little crossover's appeal should extend far beyond those loyal folk to those who might demand a bit more than just refinement and efficiency from their small SUV. This Yaris Cross delivers that. There are better looking, faster, plusher or cheaper cars in the segment out there, but if you can look past them and try this one, you might just agree with us that when it comes to the things that really matter in a model of this kind, this one might just be the best all-rounder that you can choose. Imagine a Yaris Supermini with crossover pretensions, and you might well be picturing something like the car we have here, although this is more than just a version of Toyota's little hatch with a few SUV panels attached. This Yaris Cross is actually 240mm longer and 20mm wider than its more familiar showroom stablemate, and it sits 95mm higher. And we might add, it looks better in the metal than it does on a screen. Size-wise, the added metal places this model somewhere in the middle of its chosen segment. The 4,180mm length is 6mm shorter than a Ford Puma, but 45mm longer than a Nissan Juke. There's usual raised SUV stance with an extra 25mm of ground clearance over the Yaris hatch, and bigger wheels of between 16 and 18 inches in size, housed in RAV4-like squared off arches. We've got the 18-inch 5 triple spoke dark grey rims here. There are some nice design touches too, like the wide rear haunches with their C-shaped character lines, the diamond-shaped roof, and this angled lower black sill strip with its smart insert. All but entry-level models feature roof rails, but you have to stretch right to the top of the range to get a contrast-coloured roof. From the front, the look is distinct. This Cross model adopts a signature design feature for Toyota SUVs, the way the upper and lower grilles form two stacked trapezoidal shapes. Slim, lozenge-shaped headlights use LED projector lamps on higher grades, with separate vertical daytime running lights and circular LED fog lights set at the bottom corners of the lower grille. The rear is defined by a wide tailgate, emphasised by this full-width red reflector strip above a square central section, which is supposed to emphasise the car's functionality. Further down, the bumper arches up towards the tailgate, and the whole thing is flanked by these slim red reflectors. Avoid base spec and you get LED tail lamps, while a neat roof spoiler adds the finishing touch. As usual, of course, what's more important is what you can't see. In this case, the compact GAB version of Toyota's current TNGA platform, which is essentially the same as that used in the larger Corolla hatch. This structure gave the Yaris Supermini a 37% improvement in stiffness and a 20 kilogram reduction in weight. A Yaris then with big ideas. Let's see how many of them we can find inside. Take a seat and you've basically got a front of cabin experience lifted straight from the Yaris Supermini. The slightly raised driving position and the area interior feel though make this seem more like a car in the class above, so it's appropriate in most models. The 7-inch instrument screen is borrowed from the Corolla in the next segment up. Other than that, the changes over the ordinary Yaris are of the detail kind, things like different trim treatments for the shiny piano black center console and for the door cards and the A-pillars. It's all a product of Toyota's French design studio in Nice, but the stylists there haven't been allowed to go further and create the jaunty, more expressive cabin design you'd find in a fully French segment rival like the Renault Captur or the Peugeot 2008. Even in this top spec version, it's actually rather dark and dour, although at least the hard plastic surfaces will be easy to keep clean. Various efforts have been made to try to lift things. On this variant, subtly different shades are used for the top and bottom sections of the fascia. There are smoked silver inserts around the pull catches and the gear stick, and you get bright silver strips on the doors and the passenger side of the fascia. Plus, top models get this part faux leather upholstery. All welcome touches, but not enough to make you want to choose this car on the basis of its showroom ambiance. Infotainment Technology used to let small Toyota models down at a dealership first view too, but things have gradually been improving in that area with the brand's models in recent years. The standard offering is the 8-inch Toyota Touch 2 central screen that we have on this test car. This features with either the 2 base trim levels or, for some reason, on top models fitted with Toyota's optional City Pack, as here. Without that extra cost spend, these top variants would get a more satisfying 9-inch HD Toyota Smart Connect central screen, which lacks this smaller monitor's useful little physical outer buttons, but in other respects is a decent step beyond, with a built-in SIM card, over-the-air updates and connected cloud navigation. But this older tech 8-inch monitor has everything you really need, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone connectivity, provision for a surround view panoramic camera system, an energy monitor and a more basic Go navigation system. At the time of this test, you couldn't have any sort of navigation on an ordinary Yaris, which, if you had originally wanted one of those, might make you, well, cross. What about the 7-inch colour multi-information display in the instrument cluster that we referenced earlier? Well, you don't actually get this with base icon trim, which makes do with the ordinary Yaris's little 4.2-inch screen and weird binocular style dials. This bigger layout is worth having though. It doesn't take up the whole binnacle screen as on a Volkswagen Group model, so it can't show full width mapping unfortunately. Here, 2 analog gauges, a power meter on the left and fuel and temperature readouts on the right flank a display that's centered around a speedometer, the bottom half of which changes colour depending on your chosen drive mode. In the centre of the speed gauge is a customizable section, and that can show fuel economy, compass, audio and trip computer readouts. Good pedal alignment and lots of seat and wheel adjustability means it's easy to find an ideal driving position, but you don't get lumbar support unless you stretch to the sport seats, which feature on the top 2 variants. As for all-round visibility, well, it helps that you sit a bit higher here than in some small crossovers, and your frontward vision is aided by these relatively slim A-pillars with their neat little built-in speakers. Different story looking over your shoulder because the rear C and D pillars are pretty chunky, so it's just as well that a parking camera is standard fit along with the usual rear sensors. Top models can also benefit from Toyota's useful intelligent clearance sonar, which uses auto braking to stop you inadvertently manoeuvring into low-speed obstacles. What else? Well, surprisingly, given the design resources of the world's biggest car maker, not all the ergonomics are perfect. The electric window switches aren't properly lit at night, and this bank of little buttons down by your right knee are hard to see even when you're stationary. You might actually drive off the road trying to use them on the move. Thankfully, there's nothing vital down there. It's also not ideal that even on this top spec model, there's an ugly panel beneath the climate control buttons, which has blanked off switches. Still, at least those climate functions aren't buried away within the menus of the central screen as they would be on a Citroën or a Peugeot in this segment. Storage provision isn't bad, although Toyota has forgotten ticket clips in the sun visors and an overhead compartment for your sunglasses, but you do get a decently sized glove box and door pockets which are bigger than they look. Plus, there's a nicely backlit well at the base of the centre stack with a 12-volt socket and a USB-A port just above, along with twin cup holders between the seats and a fold-down armrest between the seats with a shallow internal tray. Okay, let's take a seat in the back. With a 240mm increase in wheelbase length, this Cross model is obviously significantly more spacious than a Yaris Super Mini in the back, but it's not the largest crossover in the class, and these rear door openings are a bit small. So what's in store on the back seat? A decent amount of space for a car of this kind is the answer. We're particularly impressed with headroom, although you might want to try it before you buy in this regard if you embellish the car with the optional sky view panoramic roof. Otherwise though, a couple of 6-footers would be fine here, and if they needed to insert a child between them, that'd be okay given the relatively small size of this central transmission tunnel. There are a few mean touches. Toyota hasn't bothered to fit a USB port on the back of this central bin, which doesn't really fit with this car's trendy vibe, and these seat back pockets only feature right at the top of the range. Still, if you avoid entry-level trim, the central part of the seat back here folds forward to reveal a couple of cup holders, and there are bottle holders in the doors, plus coat hooks in the grab handles. Unfortunately, this bench doesn't slide as it would in a rival Renault Captur or Volkswagen T-Cross, and as it used to in the old pre-2012 Mark II version of the Yaris Supermini. But that's because the hybrid system battery resides under it rather than beneath the boot floor as it used to on older Yaris hybrids. That should benefit trunk space, so let's take a look. This powered hatch, which can work with this kick action sensor, only features with top spec trim. Once everything's raised, up to 397 litres of space is available in a front-driven model, which is 111 litres more than you'll get in a Yaris Supermini, and a significant amount more than you'll get with this car's full hybrid rivals in this class. A Hyundai Kona hybrid offers 374 litres, a Honda HR-V has 335, and a Renault Captur E-Tech 145 offers just 326 litres. If you judge by conventional segment standards though, you'll have to make some allowances. A Nissan Juke, for example, well, that would give you 422 litres, and a Ford Puma has 456 litres. Top models, they're up around the 500 litre mark. The trunk figure we just gave you is for a front-driven Yaris Cross. The four-wheel drive version with its bulkier double wishbone rear suspension arrangement, well, that inevitably suffers a bit more in this regard. Carriage capacity there is down to 320 litres. Whatever variant you choose, you should find the boot area to be pretty usable. It extends back 816 mils to the seat backs and offers 1402 millimetres of width, enough for, say, a pushchair to fit in quite easily. And if you're taking wide items like golf club bags in width-wise, then these deep corner recesses here will help. The big ticket item, if you can stretch to this top level of trim, is Toyota's smart cargo system, which isn't actually that smart. It's just a 60-40 split deck board, which permits part or all of this floor section to be lowered, so larger and taller items can be carried. It could do with being a bit more carefully trimmed on the edges, but it will be a welcome feature for Yaris Supermini customers who are irritated that an adjustable height boot fork can't be fitted to UK spec versions of that car. Otherwise, it's all pretty standard stuff. The loading lip isn't too high. There are 4 silver tie-down points, and on top spec versions, you get a left-hand 12-volt socket. There's space below the lower floor for a space-saver spare wheel, but annoyingly, Toyota doesn't offer one, even as an option. Unfortunately, that's not unusual in this segment, but what is unusual in this class is provision of a versatile 40-20-40 split rear backrest, which features here, provided you avoid base trim, so long items like skis can be slid between 2 rear-seated passengers. Folding everything flat doesn't release the kind of space you'd find in obvious rivals. There's 1,097 litres of it in a front-driven model loaded up to the roof, but that should be sufficient for the needs of most owners. So what would you pay for a car that looks like this? Well, obviously a bit more than you'd have to find for the Supermini that's side it. How much more will depend on the trim level you have in mind for your Yaris Cross. From launch in mid-2021, Toyota was asking between £22,500 and £26,500 for front-driven versions of this car, and that's spread across 4 main trim levels, starting with Icon, then progressing through design to the 2 top spec variants, the luxury-orientated Excel that we have here, or the sportier-looking Dynamic model. All models use the same 1.5 litre VVT-i 116 horsepower, self-charging full hybrid petrol engine mated to the usual Toyota CVT auto gearbox. And in dynamic form, this car can also be had with something that's extremely rare on a small SUV these days, 4-wheel drive, although the £2,360 premium for that obviously pushes the price up even further to around £29,000 at the time of this test in late 2021. We mentioned speculation about the price gap to the standard Yaris Supermini. Well, that varies quite a lot with spec, anything from around £2,500 at the foot of the range to around £4,000 for this top level trim. It's also worth briefing you on the price gap to the next model up in the Toyota SUV range, the CHR. Well, that's around £5,500, although comparisons can't be direct because the CHR is 200mm longer and it uses larger 1.8 and 2 litre hybrid engines, and by the way, it can't be had with four-wheel drive. Right, time to look at obvious rivals to this Toyota in the small SUV segment and the value proposition that Yaris Cross pricing offers. You have to be careful here to compare like with like. For a start, this Toyota's auto only, so you'll have to factor that in. But the main potential for confusion lies with the way that the word hybrid is bandied around in this sector these days. It usually refers to a mild hybrid engine. This is the sort of thing you'll get in a Ford Puma, a Hyundai Kona, a Kia Stonic, or a Suzuki Vitara in this class. Now, all this does is take a conventional engine and then lightly tinsel it with a sprinkling of largely ineffective electrification, which sees the car recovering energy under braking or deceleration and then storing it in a little lithium-ion battery for use in acceleration or when the vehicle is using its stop-start system. For reference, a comparable mild hybrid automatic, a version of the Stonic for example, that costs about the same as this Toyota. The mild hybrid Kona is difficult to compare because no auto option is offered there. A mild hybrid Vitara, an automatic, costs between £23,000 and £25,000 depending on whether you include dealer discounts, and the cheapest auto version of the Puma is a heady £25,000. But you shouldn't really be comparing against those models anyway, because the self-charging full hybrid engine of the sort you get in this Yaris Cross is very different and can only be had with auto transmission. Unlike a mild hybrid, it can allow the car to run on battery power alone, although only for short periods, and the larger battery in question will, particularly in urban use, be constantly cutting in and out to assist the combustion unit. And that's why the efficiency gains you get with full hybrid tech are so much greater. Now, at the time of this test in late 2021, only 3 other class contenders were offering this kind of engine. Price-wise, the most relevant one is the Hyundai Kona hybrid. That costs around £1,500 more than this Toyota, but it can't rival the super low CO2 stats you get at the bottom of the Yaris Cross range. The other 2 full hybrid options in this class, well, they cost quite a lot more. The Renault Captur E-Tech Hybrid 145, that's priced from around £25,000, and the Honda HR-V, that costs from around £27,000. Toyota's pricing is starting to look quite cheap now then, isn't it? Your ideal, of course, with an SUV in this segment might be to have a plug-in hybrid or maybe even to get full EV tech, but that adds an awful lot of money to the list price of a car in this class, which is why Toyota doesn't offer it. To give you some perspective, at the time of this test, the cheapest full electric vehicle in the class was the Mazda MX-30 at around £26,000, but you might well be put off by that car's feeble 124-mile driving range. The cheapest small SUV with a representative driving range is the MG ZS EV, priced from around £26,500, but other more familiar contenders, the Peugeot E2008, the Vauxhall Mokka E and the DS3 Crossback E-Tense, they all reside price-wise in the £30,000 to £35,000 bracket. As for PHEV tech, well, at the time of this test, there was only one contender, and that's Renault's Captur E-Tech plug-in hybrid 160, and that costs nearly £31,500. Having considered all that, you might well come to the conclusion that taking price into account, a self-charging full hybrid solution makes the best all-round sense in this segment in these post-diesel days, in which case what Toyota is offering here could look very attractive, especially as it generally won't cost you any more than mid-range versions of conventionally powered popular choices in this segment, which don't feature any engine electrification at all, so can't get near this Yaris Cross model's efficiency figures. Like for example the Nissan Juke, the Skoda Kamiq, Seat Arona Puma, Volkswagen's T-Cross, Ford's EcoSport, and of course the ordinary versions of the other small SUVs that we've already mentioned. Slightly pricier, generally starting in the £23,000 to £25,000 bracket, are crossovers like Jeep's Renegade and Mazda's CX-30, while you need to be thinking £25,000 upwards for a representatively comparable Volkswagen T-Roc or a Suzuki S-Cross. Enough with price comparisons. Let's say you've considered all that and decided that a Yaris Cross seems to be exactly what you want. If so, the deal might be sealed Toyota's way by a bit of generosity when it comes to standard specification. So let's take a look at that now. As we mentioned earlier, the range kicks off with Icon trim, and that gets you 16-inch alloy wheels, auto high beam headlights and auto wipers, powered heated mirrors and an alarm immobiliser. On the inside there's automatic air conditioning with a pollen filter, a 3-spoke leather-stitched multifunction steering wheel, a drive mode selector and intelligent adaptive cruise control with a speed limiter which is adjustable. Media connectivity, well, that's taken care of by an 8-inch Toyota Touch 2 multimedia center dash display. Now that incorporates a reversing camera. It lets you connect in your smartphone wirelessly, and that's via Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it provides access to Bluetooth and a 6-speaker DAB stereo system too. Plus you get a wide range of camera safety features which we'll come to in just a moment. Across the Yaris Cross range, useful connected services can be accessed via the MyT Toyota smartphone app. Features include practical and useful information about Toyota and an eco driving app. MyT also logs driving data, so information about mileage, speed and acceleration can be retrieved at a later date. It can also provide reminders about when the car's services are due. Beyond Icon spec, as we touched on earlier, there's quite a big price jump to the next step up in the range, design trim, and that's the variant Toyota expects around 50% of customers to choose. Still, you do get quite a bit more kit in return, including a smarter look, courtesy of full LED headlights, LED front fog lamps, bright rear LED tail lamps, LED turn indicators, rear privacy glass, roof rails, and larger 17-inch 5 double-spoke bi-colour alloy wheels. Inside at this level, the cabin gains the Yaris signature feature, Toyota's binocular-style colour instrument display screen with a digital speedo and a 7-inch colour multi-information binnacle screen. Also included at this level are 40-20-40 split-folding rear seats, blue ambient cabin lighting and a black headliner. If you can afford to progress further up the range, there are two similarly priced top spec choices, the Excel spec we have here if you prioritise luxury, or an alternative dynamic trim level if you want something a bit sportier. Both get dual zone air conditioning, part faux leather upholstery and heat for the front seats and for the steering wheel. In addition, there are extra little touches like power folding mirrors, seat back pockets, a 12-volt socket in the boot and smart entry with push button start. Front-wheel drive variants also get a much more convenient boot arrangement, and that's thanks to Toyota's smart cargo system, which gives you a 40-60 split deck board and underfloor storage. And there's a higher standard of infotainment connectivity with XL and Dynamic models too, courtesy of a larger 9-inch HD Smart Connect center infotainment screen with over-the-air updates and an embedded SIM card which provides a constant connection. Now this Smart Connect setup takes advantage of connected cloud services, and that provides always-on navigation and offers moment-by-moment information on traffic events, and that's via a community feedback-based live road events feature, and that makes journeys as time efficient and as trouble-free as possible. As for the differences between the XL and Dynamic models, well, there are different styles of 18-inch alloy wheel and different colours for the fabric seat trim and the roof liner. Apart from that, Dynamic spec gets you a contrast coloured roof, metallic paint, front and rear silver underruns and an essential protection pack which gives you rear seat protection and a boot liner. But XL trim counters with front parking sensors, a powered tailgate with a kick sensor and some extra camera safety features which we'll cover off in a moment. Onto options across the range. There's lots of practical stuff available, although no kind of spare wheel, unfortunately, even though there'd be room for a space saver spare under the cargo floor. What you can have is an SUV pack that's offered to Icon, Design and XL customers, giving you rear seat protection, a boot liner, mudguards and side steps. If you don't quite need all of that, then the same 3 trim levels get offered the Essential Protection Pack that we mentioned earlier on, with just the rear seat protection and the boot liner. Side steps, well, they can be ordered separately across the range, as can rubber floor mats and mudguards as part of the Adventure Pack. You can also add in a dash cam, a towing pack and a flex belt, which allows you to keep smaller items in place in the boot here. If you prioritise aesthetics, you can add in a sports pack with front and rear silver skirts. Design trim can be had with 17-inch 10-spoke matte black alloy wheels, while Excel and Dynamic models, they can be ordered with 18-inch machined black 10-spoke alloy wheels. What else? Well, on most models you will of course have to pay extra for metallic or pearlescent paint. With the next trim level up, Design, you can add in the larger 9-inch HD Toyota Smart Connect central multimedia screen, and on an XL or Dynamic model you can pay extra for a Skyview panoramic roof and Toyota's upgraded 8-speaker, 8-channel JBL premium sound audio system. With these top 2 trim levels, there's also the option of a City Pack, which gives you a 360-degree panoramic view monitor surround view camera system and an advanced parking assist system that'll automatically steer you into spaces. But the downside is the need to have a slightly smaller 8-inch central infotainment screen, although it does include Go navigation, Wi-Fi and voice recognition. With Dynamic trim, that pack is called the City and Advanced Safety Pack, and that's because, as well as the features I just mentioned, it also adds the extra camera safety features of an Excel variant, along with front parking sensors and also the intelligent clearance sonar, which brakes the car to avoid parking speed collisions, things like low walls and tree roots, so very useful. Enough on options, what about the safety standards of this Yaris Cross? While Toyota has long maintained a policy that safety is not an option, and sure enough, the Yaris was the first small car to achieve Euro NCAP's highest 5-star rating. This Cross version starts off with a significant advantage of that model's stiff GAB platform, which features extra reinforcement and robust ring structures to increase rigidity, all of which allows for better absorption of impact forces, helping to maintain the integrity of the cabin and of course the safety of the occupants in the event of a collision. If an impact like that takes place, you'll be further aided by this model's inclusion of SRS centre airbags. SRS centre airbags deploy in the event of a side impact and help to prevent the driver and the front seat passenger from colliding with each other. On top of that, you get a full portfolio of Toyota's Teammate package of really significant camera and radar-driven features, which impressed the Euro NCAP safety testers enough for them to give this car a full 5-star rating. Arguably the most important inclusion is the pre-collision system with Pedestrian Detection. That's an autonomous braking setup. Here, a front-mounted camera and a millimetre wave radar both scan the road ahead at between 16 and the vehicle's 106 miles an hour top speed, searching for potential collision hazards, either with people or animals, solid objects or other vehicles. If something you might be in danger of hitting is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied, and that's to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. As we just mentioned, the system can specifically detect pedestrians, and it can do so in both day and nighttime driving at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. It can also specifically detect cyclists, although only in daylight. We have seen the pre-collision system with pedestrian detection before on other Toyota models, but here it's been further embellished with 2 more features. There's emergency steering assist, which helps you if you have to take sudden avoiding action. And for the first time in this segment, you'll also get intersection turn assist. Now this helps to avoid the common risk of colliding with another vehicle or a pedestrian when you're making a turn at an intersection. If the system detects an oncoming pedestrian crossing the carriageway that you're just about to turn into, or if there's a risk of the vehicle moving across the path of oncoming traffic, an alert will be sounded, and if the driver fails to respond, automatic emergency braking will then be applied. This function operates at speeds between 6 and 15 miles an hour. Just how many accidents could be avoided if this feature was standard on all modern small cars? Other Toyota teammate features include lane departure alert, now embellished with lane tracing assist and steering control, so the car will not only warn you if you accidentally cross lane delineating lines, but it will also apply subtle steering assistance to ease you back to where you ought to be. The system can also recognise road margins like curbs, grass or earth, so that steering assistance is available more of the time, both on straight roads and through bends. If the road markings are obscured or they can't be detected, then the system will follow the path or the vehicle ahead of you while keeping within the traffic lane. Road sign assist is also standard. It pictures road signs as you pass them and displays them on the dash, and so is driver attention alert, which monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness. And as we mentioned earlier, the standard spec also includes automatic high beam headlights and intelligent adaptive cruise control too, which can automatically maintain your distance to the car in front on the highway. If you've opted for Plush XL spec or on a dynamic model, you've paid extra for the City and Advanced Safety Pack option we referenced earlier, you can get 2 further camera safety features: rear cross traffic alert, which can detect approaching vehicles and warn you as you reverse out of a bay, and a blind spot monitor, which works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. This Yaris Cross also gets plenty of more conventional safety kit too, twin front, side and curtain airbags for example, although unlike in other Toyotas, there's no further airbag for the driver's knees. If any of these bags go off in an accident, there's an e-call system which will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location. There's also an SVSC, Steering Assisted Vehicle Stability Control System, which provides cooperative control of the car's ABS braking, VSC stability and TRC traction functions, along with the electric power steering system. Plus you get a tyre pressure warning feature, active headrests to guard against whiplash, and ISOFIX charge seat mounts on the 2 outer rear seats. On top of that, there's hill start assist control to stop the car rolling backwards when you pull away on steep inclines. While other brands are just about getting around to hybrid electrification, Toyota is already on the 4th generation of its petrol-electric power plant. The engineering here was completely overhauled for the 4th generation Yaris hybrid that this Yaris Cross SUV is based on. We're going to get to the detail on that in just a moment. And the result is that this powertrain's overall efficiency has improved by 22%, despite the fact that power output has risen by 16%. As for the WLTP rated figures for this little crossover, well, they're class leading, with a combined cycle fuel economy of up to 64.2 miles per gallon for a base Icon grade variant with 16-inch wheels, and that returns up to 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. For reference, the stats of a comparable Yaris Supermini are 68.8 miles per gallon and 92 grams per kilometre, which gives you some idea of the penalty you're paying for this cross model with 90 kilos of extra weight and a slightly higher, larger body shell. It's not too onerous, even in plusher variants like this one, which feature larger wheels. With this XL spec model or with the comparable top dynamic variant, you're looking at bests of 56.5 mpg and 112 grams per kilometre. Even on a dynamic model with the all-wheel drive i 4x4 system fitted, the downside isn't too great. There you're looking at possible bests of 55.2 mpg and 115 grams per kilometre. If you are a potential Yaris Cross customer, you'll feel even better about those stats once you've got some class perspective on the readings that we've just given you for this little crossover. A rival Hyundai Kona hybrid is some way off, with base trim managing bests of 57.6 miles per gallon and 112 grams per kilometre. While a base spec Renault Capture E-Tech Hybrid 145 is even further away, that returns bests of 56.5 mpg and 113 grams per kilometre. If you're going to get much worse than that with a self-charging small SUV of this sort, you might as well save yourself the trouble of investing in full hybrid tech and get yourself a crossover with a less sophisticated mild hybrid power plant. That's a comment that in efficiency terms applies to a Honda HR-V full hybrid model, which in base spec can only manage the same 52.3 miles per gallon and 122 grams per kilometre returns as you get from a mild hybrid Ford Puma in this class. Toyota, though, has really made this self-charging full hybrid powertrain format work for a car of this kind. How have they done it? Well, like the previous generation Toyota hybrid unit, this one benefits from exceptionally high levels of thermal efficiency, 40% to be precise, ensuring that more of the energy potential of every drop of fuel is captured. This Polish-built unit is still using the Atkinson cycle, which keeps the intake valves open for longer and delays the compression stroke, but in its fourth generation form it has just 3 cylinders instead of the previous 4, and that partly explains why Toyota has managed to keep the weight of this car down to just 1,175 kilos in its lightest form. That's substantially less than the rivals I just mentioned. Those competing brands will be poring over this car's Synergy Drive power plant to better understand its redesigned power control unit and its more compact and lightweight hybrid transaxle, which places the hybrid system's 2 electric motors on multiple shafts rather than one behind the other, and that reduces the transaxle's width by 37 millimeters. Perhaps most importantly, though, is the fact that this setup's 0.76 kilowatt-hour battery pack is these days of the lithium-ion kind rather than the old-fashioned nickel-metal hydride sort. That has pushed voltage up to 177.6 volts, and it's hugely improved current flow by 100% into the battery and by 50% out of it. Now, because this battery is so small, it can be located beneath the rear seat rather than under the boot floor, and because of that location it can remain cooler than it would otherwise be, and that negates the need for a standalone liquid cooling system that you'll find with full hybrids from some rival brands. Plus, this power pack is the lightest of its kind. Small wonder then that the overall efficiency figures of the Yaris Cross are class leading. Those in a frugal frame of mind will want to try to get as close as possible to replicating the official figures by using the instrument binnacle's left-hand power meter display, and as often as possible staying in its blue charge and green eco zones. Toyota rather ambitiously reckons that its self-charging hybrid engines are capable of covering up to 80% of a typical daily commute under electric power alone. As usual on a Toyota hybrid, there's an available EV button which is supposed to fix the car in electrified motion. That can apparently take place at up to 81 miles an hour. In reality, though, you'll find that the batteries are hardly ever charged up enough for you to actually be able to use that feature, and even when you can, it'll only last for around 4 miles. To be fair, full hybrid engines, unlike plug-ins, aren't designed to run for extended periods under full electrification. The idea instead is that the battery will cut in and out as needed during town driving. As a result, during much of your urban motoring in a Yaris Cross, say when you're inching along in traffic with the engine seamlessly disabled, the EV mode activated and battery power in motion, you won't be emitting any emissions. At higher speeds, you will need to bear in mind that the quoted fuel figures are even more heavily dependent than usual on the driver assuming a significant degree of restraint. The provided eco-driving section of the MyT Toyota smartphone app, that might help here. To get anywhere near even the 50 mpg mark in day-to-day use in this Toyota, you'll have to keep the car locked into the driving mode system's eco mode, which moderates throttle response and engine power output and tweaks the climate control. And ideally you'll be selecting the CVT Gearbox's extra provided B setting, which increases the level of regenerative braking and therefore the level of energy harvesting. During your journeys, you might like to monitor the hybrid system's cleverness on the energy display, which is right in your eye line as a selectable option on the instrument binnacle's 7-inch central screen. This graphic appears in more detailed form in the info part of the center stack monitor, and that shows with impressive clarity what at any time is being powered by what. That bigger screen, same info segment, has a graphical trip information section, and that shows the amount of energy recently regenerated. Plus there's a history screen option too that allows you to gauge your ongoing success in fuel economy. And there's an eco section of the little screen in the instrument binnacle that can give you an average fuel consumption and driving range. Or in the same area, you can select a display that shows your EV driving ratio, or one with an eco zone bar, below which you'll be awarded marks for each journey's start, cruise and stop etiquette. Those marks will be repeated in a trip summary display that shows in the center of the instrument screen at the end of each trip, just before you power off. All the sophisticated hybrid technology we referenced earlier on might make you worry about this Yaris crossover model's reliability, but the Prius-derived engineering that's in use here scores very highly on almost every customer satisfaction survey going. Plus, the Yaris Cross is covered by a 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty, and owners can extend that at no cost through the Toyota Relax program, and that's simply by having your vehicle serviced at an authorized Toyota center, and you gain an extra year and 10,000 miles of cover, up to a limit that reaches 10 years or 100,000 miles. Unlike earlier Toyota hybrid models, there's no extended warranty for the hybrid components. Earlier Priuses, they were covered for up to 8 years. As standard, Yaris Cross buyers get a 3-year paint warranty and 12 years of anti-perforation cover, but these days Toyota only covers you for a year of roadside breakdown assistance. As for looking after your car, well, routine maintenance is every 10,000 miles or 12 months, depending on which comes around first. That may be a bit frustrating if you're a higher mileage driver. The Mighty Toyota smartphone app can provide reminders about when the car's services are due. Hybrid models are subject to extra service checks, but Toyota doesn't charge any more to do that. There's a dedicated My Toyota website which allows you to book in a service online, and Toyota has a fixed price servicing plan, so you'll know in advance exactly how much any work is going to cost before you check in to the dealer. You could also take advantage of the optional prepaid service plan that the dealer will offer you at point of purchase. This enables Yaris Cross owners to cover the cost of routine maintenance with monthly or one-off payments in advance. However you go about paying for maintenance on your Yaris Cross, it shouldn't cost you too much. After all, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, there's no drive belt to break, there's a maintenance-free timing chain, there's no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to the CVT Auto Gearbox, there's no clutch either. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimizing tire wear, and battery life should be the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps to extend the life of the brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pads should only need replacing once, while the rear pads and all the discs will probably last the full distance. What about predicted residual values? Well, in the ordinary Yaris Super Mini, you retain 51.4% of its original value after 3 years and 36,000 miles. We'd expect the Yaris Cross to match or better that, hence the relatively affordable PCP finance terms you can get on it. The low CO2 readings we mentioned earlier mean quite an affordable VED band, £150 for year one. And this car's frugal emissions will be particularly good news for business motorists, with the benefit in kind rating for company car tax pitched at between 24 and 27% according to model grade. That's very good by class standards. Finally, let's talk about insurance. The base Icon variant is rated at Group 11E, and all the other trim grades it's Group 12E. In some ways, Toyota has never really made the most of its pioneering hybrid technology, but with this Yaris Cross, they can really do so. You could argue, rightly, that not many folk choose a fashion-led small crossover with sensible priorities, but if you were to prioritise those in selecting this kind of car, then this one makes an incredible amount of sense, with genuine 45 to 55 miles per gallon regularly achievable economy. That's thanks to its full hybrid powertrain, the kind of engine the brand's able to offer here more affordably than you'll find in direct rivals, and a trendy vibe thrown in too. Which is just as well, because Toyota needs this car and needs it to sell well if projections of 150,000 European sales a year are to be realised. That's 8% of the B SUV segment. The brand reckons that the entire Yaris range, Supermini, GR Hot Hatch and this crossover model will, going forward, account for a third of all its European sales. With every brand you can think of piling into the same sector with small lifestyle crossovers, we can't help thinking that these projections are ambitious, but Toyota is an ambitious company and it has given its rivals a pretty free run at this very lucrative segment for far too long. Now, you could argue that 20 years ago, the original three-door RAV4 pioneered this class of car, but the brand never properly capitalised on that model, instead bringing us quirky but unappealing small lifestyle products like the Yaris Verso and the Urban Cruiser. The RAV4's modern-day successor, the CHR, has found favour, but it's too expensive for most Juke and Puma folk. The Yaris Cross should suit their needs more precisely, and if it does, it'll suit Toyota even better.